ASMR Who, and I just watched Dot and Bubble, and so this is my immediate reaction, of course. As always, I have not looked at other people's reactions, I've not looked at the general consensus, so I don't know what people think of this. My instinct is that it will probably be a little, not controversial, but I think there'll be a real mix of reactions to this, in the same way that I think there was a mix of reactions to 73 Yards, which I kind of predicted last week as well, I believe. But yeah, I don't know what people think of this, of course. And whereas last week I thought there'd be a range of opinions, but I really loved 73 Yards. This time I'm a lot more conflicted. I really don't know what to make of this episode. I enjoy this sort of central premise. I think it's I think visually it's very strong, the idea of people, being in these bubbles, and it controlling the way they move, and, all this sort of stuff. I thought it's a strong premise. It's a strong premise in terms of the actual premise of it. It's also strong visually, strong narratively. But I'm not sure that it all quite came together for me. I'll talk about the positives first, because, as I say, I enjoyed the central premise. I enjoyed the visual idea of the bubbles and the using the sort of subtext of, obviously we're talking about social media and the idea of social bubbles, and echo chambers kind of becoming the text, in a very clear visual way. No, not but, because I'm just doing positives. I enjoyed that idea. I thought that our main character this week, whose name Kaylee Cook, I believe is the actress's name, I thought she was good for the character. I think it's a very interesting, very bold decision to make the main character not likable. I don't think you're really at any point supposed to like Lindy Pepperbean. She's kind of obnoxious and rude, and deceitful. She lies, ungrateful, and is not redeemed in the end. And I think it's a very bold decision to make that your main character. But I don't know if that was the side effect of doing that, is that for the entire episode you're stuck with a character you don't like. I will say I thought that she was, as much as she's not likeable and she's not redeemed, she's not really redeemable. She is. I think what saved her from being entirely unlikable the entire time, like really hateable, and what kind of made me think, it could go either way in the end. Will she turn around and, redeem herself almost? It's the moments when she removes the bubble, she turns her dot off, and for example, the entire first sort of sequence with Ruby where she first sees the monsters, which they never got named, right? We don't know what they are, and I'll come back to that shortly. That entire sequence where she looks through her bubble and can see that the other people in her workroom aren't there, and then turns off her dot, turns off her bubble, and looks and sees the guy next to her in the process of being eaten. Was genuinely really creepy and tense and kind of unsettling. The moment when she turns, the great thing with the character I really felt as well was when she turns her bubble off and starts walking and discovers she can't walk without her bubble. She can't walk without being told how to walk. Was a genuinely really great moment, and there were a few moments where she was like, I'm really stupid, and where she panicked because this thing that she is so reliant on wasn't safe anymore, and so she feels like she can't walk and she doesn't know where she's going, and she doesn't I thought it was very interesting. My thoughts with this one are really all over the place, so I apologise for that, because in terms of what other positives did I like? I thought the idea that Ricky September, you think is just going to be this, music guy, actually being an ally and he knows what he's talking about, was really good. But in terms of what I didn't like, and I think as much as there was lots of great stuff in this that I did like, I think the stuff I didn't like is going to sit with me more. And not a lot of this was explained, which really worked last week in 73 Yards. I think not explaining that really added to it. I think not explaining this, it's just kind of like, well, what is Vine Time? What's going on with the planet? Why are these people the way they are? What happened to the home world? Who made the monsters? What are them, I don't think we will ever get those answers, particularly. Because I felt at the end, the other positive I will say, of course, is Shooty and Millie, who aren't in this loads, but they're decent. They're good for what they get to do, and that moment at the end, where the Doctor is desperately pleading with these people to let him save them, and they simply refuse. Shooty plays that really well, but to just end the episode on, well, they're all going to go and die, and he just has to give up. Was really kind of deflating and sad, and to get the Doctor failing and also get no answers in terms of what was going on, even a thing of like, look, these people are the way they are and we did our best, but there's nothing more we can do. But there isn't that. But the Doctor just leaves defeated, and that was, I didn't love that. And I didn't, I really can't get on board with the way Ricky September was killed, and I understand that was the character, but it was really cruel. and horrible. And I think it's very bold. As I said, it's very bold to make the main character unlikable, but will that rub people up the wrong way? I just feel, I also think that people describe this episode as being very Black Mirror in the sort of promotional sense, in the, lead up to it. I'm not a massive, I've not seen Black Mirror. It's not a show I'm a fan of. I've never delved into it particularly myself. But I think that in not explaining what is going on and why things are the way they are, and I'm not saying every little detail has to be explained, but really nothing is explained in terms of what's going on here. I think in not really explaining that, it kind of makes the sort of social commentary of this feel a bit like, I don't know, it's very obvious that it's talking about social media and friendship bubbles and, people being in their bubbles and being in echo chambers, and there's also commentary on, these people being the rich kids who can pay for it, or their parents are paying for it, and then, they're all stupid and vapid and self-absorbed, and it's like, okay, but what? I'm not entirely sure how those two elements really work together, other than people being kind of so connected to their bubbles that they're not noticing the monsters. But that's the point of the thing, right? I don't know. But then also you've got Ricky September, who's clearly, presented as a kind of a parody of these cheesy boy band, singer type, sort of kind of Justin Bieber-esque, sort of mid-noughties Justin Bieber-esque kind of characters. But then, actually, he's not, he turns his bubble off and he reads. But like, how do they have books in Vine time? Because it seems like that's not how things work. What is the society? They work for 2 hours doing data collection or whatever, and then they party the rest of the time, but they all keep their bubbles on all the time, so they don't physically interact. But why is he not tuned into if that's what they're all like, why is he not like that? I think, while I was watching it, I was enjoying it, and I was invested to see where it was going, and there are absolutely great moments in this. I stated that sort of first sighting of the monster eating the guy with his legs hanging out of it, and her realising she can't walk on her own. For me, that's a standout moment of the episode. I really liked that. I really liked the panic of it. I really liked the kind of horrific nature of, there are people dying on the street next to you and you're not even noticing them. And although it was cruel and horrible, I kind of liked the fact that, this guy who she's with, and she's so in love with him in a sort of vapid sense, she'll throw him to the wolves immediately and let him die in her place. It's a kind of cruel, horrible twist, but that's good. But then the ending just felt really flat. I quite liked the idea that this is not a society that can be saved. And maybe it's not a society that should be saved, and maybe that's the point. But the Doctor doesn't make the choice to not save them. Because he wouldn't. The Doctor would never actively choose to not save. He would not go, oh, I'm not going to do it then. You're horrible, I'm not going to save you. He just wouldn't. It's not in his nature. As much as he hates these people, and he clearly does, he's pleading with them. But yeah, maybe that is the point the episode is making, that these people can't be saved. These people should not be saved because they're not good. And Lindy Pepperbean is the example of that, you know, in that she is all these terrible things, and she's so self-absorbed, and she does not, you know, oh, my best friend's dead, but you don't, a minute later she doesn't care. And she meets a handsome guy, and she goes, oh, maybe it's the best day ever. All the people around you are dying, you know. I think the commentary that Russell clearly is imbuing into this script is very clear, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't need subtext all the time, you don't need subtlety all the time, but it just kind of, I'm really very conflicted, and I think I'll need to come back to this and rewatch it, you know, and go, look, it, you know, is what it's doing, the strength of its visuals and the horror of it, and the commentary, you know, does that override the sort of negatives of it? I don't know, I think it really does come down to the ending, and the ending left me flat, and that's a shame, because I was really kind of going along with what was going on in this one. I was invested to see, you know, how things were going to play out. But I don't know, I kind of don't want to watch it again, because I don't like the character. And obviously you're not supposed to, but that makes me then want to not watch it, if that makes sense. So I don't know, I'm trying to think if there's anything else about it that I really wanted to mention. I can't think that there is, to be honest. I'll be very, very interested to have a look at what other people think of this. I think it had strong moments. I think it had there's a strong premise here. I kind of understand why Russell has wanted to do this for 10 years. But the fact that, you know, really none of it is explained, because you kind of have to tell it through the perspective of someone in this society, but then that kind of limits how much you can explain, and how much the Doctor can learn, and, you know, I just feel kind of like, well, what was the point then? What was the point, other than social commentary? But do kids care about that? I don't know how I would respond to this episode as a kid. I think I'd be creeped out. But the ending is just so kind of, it really comes down to the ending for me. It's just so kind of deflating and kind of almost not miserable, but I'm trying to think what the word is. It's just like, oh well, you know, we spent 45 minutes with someone who's an arsehole. You know, met a guy who was engaging and likeable. She, you know, threw him to the wolves, so to speak, and then continually refused to listen to people who were trying to help her and save her life. Well, what, you know, as a kid, as an adventure, what's the point then? Why, you know? So, yeah, I'm very conflicted But those are my thoughts on Dot and Bubble. Let me know what you thought. I'd be very, very interested to hear, as I say, what other people thought of this. And yeah, like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you like Doctor Who, if you like ASMR, one or the other, or both, preferably. Yeah, and other than that, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening for your time. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and yeah, I will see you next week. I'm excited for this next one. The premise doesn't necessarily, I can take it or leave it, but I'm very excited to be getting brand new writers. An episode solely written, credited to entirely new writer. The first episode that doesn't have a previous writer credit on it since mid-series 12, right? 4 years ago. Yeah, we got Kay Aaron and Bryony Redman. I'm very excited to see what they do. But yeah, I will see you next week for Rogue. Thank you. Bye bye.